letting it roll, Franco. We're letting it roll. Welcome, everybody, to the Celtics Talk Weekly postgame show. I'm your host, Seamus Arlingo. Alongside of me tonight, Nick Franco. The Celtics at the TD Garden on a Friday night pick up a massive, massive win against the Milwaukee Bucks, 111-105. The Celtics, this was really one of their more entertaining games all season, back and forth throughout the matchup. And the Celtics, of course, persist late in the fourth quarter to pull out a massive victory. A little bit of sweat there at the end, but the Celtics, they execute well enough to pull out this victory. Franco, of course, as we do on this program every single night, your initial thoughts and reaction.
That was the most playoff game-esque game we've seen all season on the Celtics. I think the Bucks brought a lot of fight tonight with Chris Middleton back in the lineup. We saw what that did when the Celtics brought Kristaps Porzingis in. When you have a veteran that's been on the team, a tenured player who has the respect of the roster, has the respect of the lineups, they are going to play harder and they are going to try to bring you back on a good note. And the Milwaukee Bucks have made a bit of a recovery from their slip-up start of the season they had, and they're starting to look more like the playoff team that we were expecting coming out of the season. But the Celtics were able to match that energy that the Bucks were bringing. It seemed like a very grudgy game. The shots weren't falling for the Celtics, but they were able to pick up on those and were able to come out with the win tonight.
Yes, the Boston Celtics. Now, tonight's game wasn't pretty in every aspect, not whatsoever. From three-point land, the Celtics only shot 32% from three. And after they started 7 of 16 in the first quarter, looked like one of those nights, oh, Celtics, they're showing up from three. Here we go. But second quarter, 0 of 12, and their next 25 threes, Doris Burke mentioned on the broadcast, 5 of 25 for their next 25 threes. So the Celtics, they really fell off from three-point land tonight. You look at some of the guys who shot. Eric White, 0 of 8, just couldn't get anything going for the Celtics tonight. But other guys, Al Horford, Drew Holiday, huge down the stretch, and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, both of them playing like the all-stars. They are super aggressive and going to the rim tonight. And I really thought throughout this game, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum going to the rim, it saved the Celtics because during the portions in which the Celtics were not shooting well during this game, the portions of the game the Celtics were not shooting well, Brown and Tatum kept the team going towards the basket, and both of them were super aggressive in getting points at the rim and not letting the Bucks, of course, widen that margin of points in the paint. The Celtics have had trouble letting teams just score in the paint on them this season, and the Bucks, no, they didn't have the best of games inside the paint, but early on you saw Bobby Portis. He had 13 rebounds by the mid portion of the second quarter, and you could definitely tell in the rebounding battle the Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks just had more physicality than the Celtics had at points in this game. But the Celtics on the other end of the floor, Brown and Tatum specifically, had it going down towards the rim for the Celtics and saved them in a sense. Of course, big story tonight too. Chris Middleton back in the lineup for the Milwaukee Bucks for the first time this season. And the Milwaukee Bucks, for as much as we want to say about them this season, negatively harping on them this season, they're 11-11. They did not have the best of starts at all. They've come back a little bit over the past 2 weeks, and Chris Middleton, we can see tonight, if he's able to stay healthy, he's certainly going to keep them in the mix in the Eastern Conference. Not sure if they're a outright contender right now, but you see the firepower the Milwaukee Bucks have when Chris Middleton is out on the floor. He definitely caused the Celtics some trouble tonight, and that is very indicative in our lead tracker tonight. Here is the lead tracker for the Celtics and Bucks game on this Friday night. Now, we mentioned early in the broadcast, this was really one of the more entertaining games of the entire season for the Boston Celtics. The Milwaukee Bucks as well. You saw there was no double-digit lead at any point in this game by either team. And look at that times tied. 11 times tied in lead changes. 14 lead changes on the night for this game. Milwaukee Bucks, their biggest lead was 6. The Celtics, they led by 8. And you could tell, the Celtics, they controlled part of that first half there. And the Milwaukee Bucks, they made that run right before half and even after half and had control of the game throughout the second half. But really, for most of the night, this game went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And thankfully, late in the fourth quarter, the Celtics were able to break through, really establish a lead in the moments, the waning moments of the fourth quarter, that is. And of course, they pulled out this game tonight. Franco, what is your reaction over that lead tracker and the way this game flow went tonight?
It was a story of two halves. I think the Celtics had the shot flowing during the first half, and the Milwaukee Bucks kind of flipped the switch on us in a sense where usually we've seen the Celtics be able to make the adjustments, but it seemed like the Bucks were able to adjust to the intensity that the Celtics were playing with, and they felt that the Celtics weren't able to make those shots in the second half. The defense was playing a lot more tight knit against the Celtics, and they were almost tempting the Celtics to start attacking the rim. And once the Celtics started to get into that flow of getting aggressive towards the rim, that's when the Celtics were able to take over the game. And I think if the Celtics know when the shot's not falling, getting Tatum to attack the rim against Giannis, I think exploiting those matchups and having Brook Lopez drawn out of the paint is something that the wings are going to get much better at. And also, we saw a lot of the other players step up for the Celtics. We've been going against them, but our guy Jrue Holiday, he stepped up against his former team tonight, having 18 point 20 points tonight.
Yeah, he goes up to 20 points at the
Yes,
end.
he had his 20 piece of the, I believe that's his first 20 piece of the season, and that's something that we've been looking for him to get into. Him getting into the corner, having those shots fall, that's only going to be contagious for the other players. We had Sam Hauser making big shots, and when the team wasn't available over the past few games due to injury and rest management, we saw those players get the opportunities to step up, and it's great to see it continuing on while the team is having a more fully healthy roster.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jason Tatum within all of that equation too, and that brings up our player spotlight of the night presented by SeatGeek, Mr. Jason Tatum. Now, there was some, I don't want to say disgruntlement, but there was some definite, I would say, challenge to Jason Tatum's player spotlight tonight because, of course, Jason Tatum had a phenomenal night, 34 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 12 of 20 from the field, and 4 of 10 from three-point land. Super efficient for Jason Tatum tonight, but you mentioned the others. Jrue Holiday, 20 points. Sam Hauser, 16 points tonight. And Jaylen Brown, 25 points on 10 of 21 shooting. And even Al Horford. Justin, he was saying, hey, maybe Al Horford should be in the conversation tonight. Not necessarily for his stat line. He did have 8 points and 9 rebounds, but Al Horford, he was very crucial defensively in this game against Giannis. But with how Tatum played tonight and how efficient Tatum came out and really dictated this game in important portions of the game, I might add, we have to give it to Jason Tatum tonight because this might be one of the best Tatum performances all season long. Of course, he's been racking up the player spotlights, he's been racking up the stats, he's been racking up the MVP conversation in terms of guys putting him in that conversation. Yet tonight, 34 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 12 of 20 from the field, 4 of 10 from three, in a huge Friday night nationally televised game against the Milwaukee Bucks. And this was a performance in which we needed Tatum in because the Celtics, of course, we mentioned it earlier in this broadcast that the three ball just was not falling for the Celtics for most of this game, yet Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they really got the Celtics going downhill, specifically Jason Tatum. He was super aggressive at the rim. Franco, what did you think of Jason Tatum's performance tonight?
Yeah, when you have an MVP player, it's challenging for us as a post-game show hosts. We don't want to give Jason Tatum the MVP or the player spotlight every game because that's what is to be expected out of Jason Tatum. He is the best player on the Boston Celtics, undoubtedly, and we need to have a performance that stands out for him to be able to have the spotlight on him. And the lights were no brighter than tonight on Friday night on national television. He was able to take care of his matchups against Giannis. And I think that he was also very tough on the defensive end. This was one of the more well-rounded games we've seen out of Jason Tatum. When the shot wasn't falling for him, he was able to make those decisions. And you could see that the players around him were benefiting, like we mentioned, the Drew Holidays, the Sam Hausers, and of course his co-running star, Jaylen Brown, were able to see the successes. And it was just being able to have his composure throughout the game and being able to make the shots when they mattered is something that is going to carry the Celtics a long way. And if Tatum wants to continue to be in that MVP conversation, these are the nights that you need to have.
Oh, no doubt. And I really have a question for you in this regard because Kendrick Perkins said it on the broadcast. Now, I got to say, ESPN's panel, really not the
Oh,
biggest fan of it in the
we
world.
don't give Perk credit around here on
I
CTW.
understand, but he did say this on the broadcast tonight, or rather not on the broadcast, but during the post game show, really their post game show, and their in between post game show there between this game and of course the Warriors and Timberwolves game. But he said Jason Tatum was the best player on the floor tonight, and of course we've been putting Jason Tatum in the MVP conversation this year. Now, Giannis, he's still up there as well. You look at his numbers this year, they're phenomenal. Jokic up there as well. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, you could put him up there again. Yet, Jason Tatum, if he's going to be in the MVP conversation, if he's going to win it, the question has to be, how close is he to Giannis? I know this is kind of a nonsensical conversation in a sense because Giannis runs his own team in Milwaukee, Tatum runs his own team in Boston. But if Tatum is going to win the MVP, he's going to have to establish himself over Giannis. I believe tonight's game was one of those games where you look at it and go, this is definitely one of those performances that furthers that argument. But would you make the argument that Jason Tatum can surpass Giannis in the MVP conversation this year?
While you were talking, I was just pulling up the NBA standings for the season, and that is what the number one tester of all. The fact that he has been able to be the most major contributor on one of the best standing teams in the league. Wins are the only stat that matter, really. And I think that he's done a great job of not allowing his independent success to overshadow the team success. Once we start to have him starting to fill in on that, is going to be something that will be used in the MVP conversation. And when you talk about players like Giannis, Nikola Jokic, we know what their game is, but with Jason Tatum, it's a much different ball game. It's a much more versatile player that you are getting contributions on the athletic side, the 3-point side, and on the defensive end. And I believe that Jason Tatum is making his case well known to be the best player in the NBA right now. And performances like that just establish that.
Yeah, and Giannis, you got to give him his props too. Of course,
Yes,
Jason Tatum, he had a phenomenal game tonight. But Giannis, he had 30 points tonight, 11 rebounds, 10 of them defensive rebounds, of course, 13 of 25 from Giannis. But this is where I feel like Jason Tatum, I don't want to say there's more to his game than Giannis because that's a little unfair to Giannis. But Jason Tatum, you mentioned it, the versatility in Jason Tatum's game. That's what really I believe he can be on that category of Jokic, Giannis as some of the best players in the league. And we talk about his running mate too, Jaylen Brown. And some of these other guys now, I understand Giannis, he has Damian Lillard, and Damian Lillard had himself a game tonight. He had 31 points on the night. And of course, Jokic, he'll have Jamal Murray on any given night. But the fact Jason Tatum is doing what he's doing now on the Celtics with so much talent around him, and I think you put it best, Franco, where he's not necessarily overshadowing the rest of the team, and everything isn't quite it does rely heavily on Jason Tatum, but it's not as if, oh, Jason Tatum, he has to have these type of performances in order for the team to win, because we saw last season Jason Tatum wasn't exactly in the MVP conversation for the entirety of the season. He wasn't putting up these kind of numbers every single night. And Tatum or Brown, they kind of go back and forth. And even both of them could have a bad shooting night or two bad nights. And the Celtics could easily take over the rest of the team, whether it was Pritchard, Holiday, um, why am I blanking right now? Derek White.
Right.
I have him in my head. I'm like, who? Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis as well, who of course did not play tonight. We must mention that big factor for the Celtics. Didn't play tonight. Will likely play tomorrow against the Memphis Grizzlies. But all of those other guys, they can really take over and make up the difference if Brown and Tatum are not on yet. Tatum this year, even with all of the talent around him, he's been stellar in all of his performances, and I really don't think it's taking away from all of these other guys. Now, we will say this though. Drew, Al Horford, we were talking about them the other night in terms of, oh, are they showing their age just a little bit? Well, tonight's game, folks, this is where they showed their age on the other end. They showed their
Fine wine.
experience in
Fine
the
wine.
NBA because Drew Holiday and Al Horford, they didn't look like two old guys out there, just, oh, they're too slow for the Milwaukee Bucks. They looked like two experienced veterans who the Celtics needed out on the floor, especially late in the fourth quarter there. Al Horford with a big three at the end, and Drew Holiday, we saw him at the end escaping there from AJ Brown. That was really the one play where you're looking at it going, wow, we really called Drew Holiday old the other night, yet he's running away from
Running
a
laps.
from a
Laps.
20-year-old right now. And essentially he won us the game with those extra seconds bled off the clock, and Derek White with the big steal at the end. But specifically talking about Drew Holiday and Al Horford, Franco, what did you think of Al Horford's performance first tonight? Then we'll touch on Drew Holiday.
Al Horford's performance, he's going to bring it against the Milwaukee Bucks. And during one of our last post-game shows against the Heat, we were talking about rivalries and what rivalries have stuck around. We know that 76ers have been a little bit behind us. The Milwaukee Nets, the Miami Heat, dare to say, are behind us. The one team that's been a little consistent in giving the Celtics that push is the Milwaukee Bucks. And Al Horford has a great matchup tonight. I think when he can't really match up to Giannis athletically, but if there's someone that Al Horford can defend and can limit in the paint, it's going to be Giannis. You can force Giannis to take those mid-range shots as much as he would like to. I will give that to him any day of the week. And I think that Al has always done a good job of being able to play with his mind more than his body. And when we talk about aged and experienced players, that's something that it comes into play. They will be able to read the game much better. They know where they're comfortable. And that's where we saw that success for Al Horford. There were a few shots that didn't go in for Al, but there were big shots at the end of the game that really made that good competition for him for player of the game tonight that he was able to make. If a few more of those shots went in, I have no doubt that we'd be staring at that big Al Horford smile at the top of the screen right now. But it's something that we would love to see, especially with Kristaps out. And once they are able to get those guys back to full health, quote unquote, which is hard to do and hard to say when you're almost only a third of the way through the season. I think that when it comes down to playoff time and we can get those types of contributions from Al off the bench, it's going to set the Celtics a level away from whoever they're playing in 7 games.
I think Al Horford tonight drank a whole gallon of muscle milk before this matchup. And I'm surprised with the week he's had, quite honestly, as well, because Al Horford on, what was it, Wednesday night against the Detroit Pistons came out and played 30 minutes. And we were kind of questioning it here on this postgame show, going, Al Horford, 30 minutes against Duran and Isaiah Stewart, who both played under 25 minutes. What exactly are the Celtics doing? Well, maybe they were getting him a cardio run for what he was in for tonight, because Al Horford, he played the entirety of the first quarter in this game, and Joe Mazzulla, he really matched Giannis on the floor with Al Horford. And for good reason, because Al Horford, at the age he is right now, Al Horford, 38 years old and going on 39, Al Horford was phenomenal on Giannis defensively tonight. I know we look at Giannis's numbers and go, oh, 13 of 25. Okay, he scored 30 points.
That's
Okay,
Giannis
Giannis.
Antetokounmpo.
But see, here's the thing, right? You're some of these players you're just hoping to limit, right? You're
Right.
limiting those players because ultimately you're not going to stop a player like Giannis. You're not going to hold him to 10 points on the night. You're not going to hold him to 15. He's going to get his baskets, but making those baskets tough, contesting those shots, and Franco, you said it best too, letting him take those mid-range jumpers because Giannis, where he thrives the most, is around the rim. He's one of the most dominant paint players since Shaquille O'Neal. He is. And yet tonight, what we
Undoubtedly.
saw is the Celtics did not allow him to get into the paint easily, did not allow him easy runs at the basket in transition, and he was really taking those mid-range jumpers in which Al Horford, he was right there, right in his face, with a hand up, hand on the ball, right in his face, and ultimately blocking his vision. And Giannis, nothing really came easy for him tonight. And that really is a testament to how great Giannis is because he still came up with a great shooting night. But Giannis, a lot of those buckets were made tough. And that was really all due to Al Horford tonight. And he really showed up for this matchup. And I believe it's looking at it, this is really hopeful for the Celtics, if you want to say it like the performance from Al Horford. Look at the rest of the performances we're looking at. We're going, yeah, Al Horford, maybe doesn't look all that spry against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Can get beat off the dribble a lot more this year than he has in the past, or has gotten beat off the dribble this year more than he has in the past. Didn't play on Monday, of course, the second night of a back to back. I don't really think we'll see him tomorrow. All that we're either not going to see him at all tomorrow. He's going to be on the injury report, or we're not going to see him that much at all. Al Horford, he might not even play against the Memphis Grizzlies. But the last two games, you look at the Pistons game, played 30 minutes, and then tonight's game. This was the big game tonight against the Bucks. I know the Bucks will talk about, okay, are they really contenders or not? I don't know. They're not really a team we fear. Even Brian Windhorst said it after the game where the Milwaukee Bucks can't win this game where we're shooting 32% from three
Right.
and we're going back and forth and we don't have Porzingis. We're not having our best shooting night. The Celtics, they're not playing up to par to where we know they can play, although a couple of our guys did have pretty nice performances tonight. How are the Milwaukee Bucks exactly going to beat us 4 out of 7 times in a series if they can't win a game like tonight? I know we question all of that, but regardless, we know the history with the Milwaukee Bucks. We know the history with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and we know his MVP caliber status. And we know coming into this Friday night game, nationally televised at the TD Garden, how many times have we seen this scenario before? There has never been a Bucks versus Celtics scenario where we're going into it going, not that big of a game. Nah, not really. Where maybe the one game last year where we were absolutely blown out by the Bucks on the second night of a back to back where they made us play the Timberwolves in night one. We beat them in overtime at the Garden, and then the next night we flew back over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, played the Bucks. They absolutely obliterated us. But even in that game, it was seen before that stretch. Oh, big 2 game stretch here. Celtics didn't come out great the second night of that back to back. But every other game, especially the games at the Garden, the Milwaukee Bucks, they want to come in and win. Giannis, he wants to come in and win. Damian Lillard, he's a high competitive player. He's truly competitive. He's one of the most competitive players in the entire NBA. Chris Middleton, he's making his return. He wants to do well. And of
Yeah.
course, Chris Middleton, just notable Celtics killer in the past. We cannot say enough about Chris Middleton destroying the Celtics in the history of the Boston Celtics. And even tonight, he came out and there was some moments where he put it to the Celtics a little bit. Now we were able to contain him in other moments, but Chris Middleton definitely played a factor in this game. So we knew it was going to be a big game. This is really the round arc. I'm rambling on this point a little bit, but regardless, this is a big game no matter what, no matter who's involved in it. And Al Horford, he shows up in this way for the Celtics? Are you serious? Are you absolutely serious? I'm not worried about what he looks like versus the Pistons. I'm not worried that he's
Right.
not going to play against the Grizzlies probably tomorrow. I'm not worried that he didn't play against the Miami Heat. I'm not worried about what he looks like against the Charlotte Hornets. All right? Because Al Horford, if he's going to drink a gallon of muscle milk before this type of matchup and come out with the defensive performance he did tonight, Give me that Al Horford in these matchups every single time over so many other players in this league who you might see as, oh, yeah, they're younger, oh, they're more sprout. Al Horford's experience is invaluable to this Celtics team. And let's throw this out too. Didn't shoot well tonight at all. At
No.
one, I believe he was what, 3 of 8, and he was 2 of 7 at one point. It might have been 2 of 8, somewhere around those numbers, right? But the
Yeah,
shots in which he made, timely, that three at the end nearly won the Celtics the game. Now, in my estimation, honestly not that great of a shot, but he was in rhythm. It was in transition. It was sort of contested. But Al Horford, he shot that ball with confidence, made that 3 pointer, and that's almost what made the difference for the Celtics down the stretch. If that ball doesn't go in, this is a lot more dicey in the final waning moments of this game. Yet Al Horford makes that 3 point shot and just
ice
I
is it.
cannot say enough good things about Al Horford tonight. But moving on from Al Horford here, because we can praise Al Horford all day for this performance. I want to talk about Drew Holiday
The
against
other
his
young
former
chicken.
team. Because Drew Holiday, they're both right now. Well, right now, Drew Holiday is entering that conversation of, oh, yeah, he's mid 30s, oh, a guard in the mid
Punk
30s. We
status,
don't
the
know.
kids like to call it nowadays.
It's like we don't know how these guards in their mid 30s are really going to age. Yet Drew Holiday, he's been up and down this season. Last season, of course, phenomenal year for the Celtics. Rob talked about it the other night. He was 60% from the corner last year, all the way down to 35% this year. Now, 35%, that's still average, a little bit below average for the corner, but average 3 point percentage for the league. And it's still like, okay, he's been okay. But a nearly 30% drop, a 25% drop, that's pretty stark if you're looking at Drew Holiday. And he's had his moments this season where he just hasn't looked all that great. Peyton Pritchard has replaced him down the stretch and really made it seem like, oh, Peyton Pritchard, he's the younger option, the more athletic, quicker option. He's running the offense just a lot better, and he's even defending at a higher level on some nights. Yet Drew Holiday in this game, these are the type of games. Again, we talked about with Al Horford and his experience, but Drew Holiday as well. Drew Holiday, 7 of 14 tonight, 20 point night for Drew Holiday against his former team, was locking up defensively. Franco, what do you think about Drew Holiday's performance tonight?
I mean, I think he came out ready to play. There's a lot of games that Drew Holiday doesn't have to be the most major contributor for the Boston Celtics. He just needs to play his game. He just needs to do his job. He's one of those players that is a Swiss Army knife on the court. You can have him do anything you almost ask him to do. And as long as he's playing well in the defensive end, that's where it all starts off. But to have him contributing on the offensive side of things, getting up to 20 points tonight is something that I'm hoping to only see grow from here from him. He is one of those players that is going to be a big contributor down the stretch. And I think we're starting to see him get a little bit more into his role with the Celtics that he was playing in last year, being able to take those matchups and be able to match up against a Damian Lillard and having some good defense. I know that step's starting to spray away from him, but as I said about Al Horford, that's when the brain takes over the body and he's able to have those high IQ plays. He was able to do for one of the first times this year was able to poke the ball out from under Giannis's arms on a rebound and kick it out for a 3-pointer after Giannis grabbed the rebound. And he's going to be able to make those plays for you. And he's a very fundamental player. The more we work him in, the more we're going to see from him. And those corner shots are something that comes second nature. So I'm not too worried about it. I think that as long as he continues to do enough for this team, there's nothing really to worry about. And also having Pritchard to almost even that out on the offensive end is a perfect ultimatum.
Now, do you think Drew Holiday and Al Horford they're almost moving into these situational roles in a sense where, say we play the Charlotte Hornets, say we play the Detroit Pistons, the Toronto Raptors. In those type of games, the Celtics, they're not really pressed to play those guys as much. Now we might, in terms of minutes, we might see them play in those
Right.
matchups, but in terms of the utilization of them, we don't need those guys in those matchups this
Keep
much.
them in your back
Yet
pocket.
right, and for these type of games, again with the Milwaukee Bucks, we always argue, are they contenders? Oh, still a big matchup for the Celtics.
Always.
Yet I think Drew Holiday and Al Horford, these are the type of matchups where we want to see them utilized. And it
Yes.
just is because you look at the competition out on the floor, some of the best veteran competition you're going to face in the entire NBA. But do you think that they've almost moved to that point in their Al Horford, I think it's safe to say, but Drew
Yeah.
Holiday, how close do you think he actually is to that category? Is he still regular rotation? We should be expecting this every single night, and this is really the more consistency we want to see out of him? Or are we going to start to see more of the Al Horford type of role in terms of Al Horford? He'll slot into the background. Some of the matchups against, say, the Raptors, against the Hornets, some of these other lesser opponents, right? We won't utilize him as much. But then in the big matchups, he comes out. Do you think Drew Holiday is kind of inching towards that category in a sense?
I would like to say that he's still a key place of has a part in this game plan that Joe draws up on a gamely basis. I think that he's started to find one of that 3-and-D role a little bit more, and we've noticed that the guards are taking the wings positions, vice versa, and I think that that's something that can be changed and also managed and could almost kind of keep the Celtics game plans a little bit more unpredictable because these players are starting to have that comfortability with each other that you can throw them into situations and they will be able to adapt. And Drew Holiday is one of those very adaptable players, and if you ask him to match up against Dame, he'll be able to do it. If you ask him to match up against Giannis, he'll be able to do it. And that's something that is irreplaceable. I think his as the game starts to grow on him and fatigue starts to become more of an issue, we'll see him play that high IQ basketball where he's kind of taking the back seat and allowing Derek White to have the harder guard matchup on defense. And I just excuse me. I hope that the Celtics will continue to utilize him in the sense of having him as a point guard, having him being able to facilitate, and he's going to be able to bring the energy from Washington to the Thunder. I think that he will be able to have a contributing role on this team until those legs give out. And once we saw again tonight, those legs aren't gone yet.
So you're essentially saying Drew Holiday not quite to that Al Horford level yet
No,
of
not.
utilization.
I think we got another year or two out of him, and it's mainly because of the just the versatility he brings. Again, he's one of those players that you can throw into multiple positions, and if let's say there's a quicker guard on the court, he doesn't have to guard him. He can always take a wing. He can always take a he can even play the middle of the paint in the zone and be that tiger role. And I think he's just one of those reliable players, and it won't always show up on the stat sheet, but we'll always get that out of him.
Now, speaking of quicker guards, and speaking of a guard who has been a little bit interchangeable with Drew Holiday this season, Mr. Peyton Pritchard, 0 points tonight. Peyton Pritchard just had the week of his career, I want to say. Really just putting up 20-point performance after 20-point performance after 20-point performance. We've had multiple videos out on him. We've talked about him multiple times on this post-game show yet. In a big matchup tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks, Peyton Pritchard, 0 points. 0 of 3, and he played 24 minutes. So it's not like his minutes were down or anything tonight. He played 24 minutes, didn't score a point, was 0 of 3 out there, and the Milwaukee Bucks were hunting him defensively. Now, Peyton Pritchard, he's had a couple of these performances, the big 20-point performances off the bench against some
Right.
teams that, yeah, yes, he had a good night against the Cavaliers. Don't want to take that away from him because the Cavaliers, they're going to be somebody we might see in the playoffs, true contending team at this moment in time. But a lot of his performances have come against maybe lesser teams. Now, do you think Peyton Pritchard moving forward, what we've saw the last week and a half, is that going to be sustainable for the rest of the season, especially in matchups like this? Or I don't want to say this is tonight what we should expect out of Peyton Pritchard because 0 points, 0
No,
of 3, that's just atrocious. But do you think he's going to regress to the mean a little bit in the bigger matchups, or is what we saw the last week and a half closer to where Pritchard actually is right now?
I surely wouldn't hope so. I think he is one of those people that we know can perform on the biggest stages. And we have seen him take those matchups that people wouldn't expect him to be able to handle and be able to survive through it. Tonight was a little bit more of a challenging game for him, and everyone has an off night, and he wasn't really the confident one out there because he was holding back on those shots. I think if he was hucking up shots and was 0 for 10 from the field, just trying to find that heat, then we would see a little bit of an issue and a little regression. But I think he's one of those players that plays for what's best for the team. And usually we see him play that spark plug role, that six as the sixth man. But tonight, the guards were able to handle that for him. And if we can if he can contribute on other ways, as Rob always says, if you're not scoring, then what are you doing? I think that he's one of those people that has been able to find his other ways to contribute on the court instead of just being that spark plug 3-pointer guy, being able to make those shots when the Celtics need them. And it's not that the Celtics didn't. It's almost that the Celtics not didn't not need that performance from him tonight because it definitely would have helped and made this a little bit less of a game to watch throughout the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. But I think that he is. This isn't something to worry about. I think we'll definitely see him bounce back. And what we were seeing from him was astronomical numbers. Getting 20 points a game is something that we can almost say that we could be an expectation for an all-star. As
Yeah,
a six
Peyton.
man, yep, you go.
No, no, go ahead, Franco.
And as a six man, I just think that, well, obviously he's going to go down, but I think that as long as he's still finding his shots and keeps that confidence, we have nothing to worry about.
See, I want to be fair to Peyton Pritchard on here and the rest of the Celtics
Right.
because, for one, we've been praising him a lot
A
recently. We really
lot.
have been praising him a lot. Like, I mean, look at his game log, folks. 20-point game after 20-point game. We're not lying on here. That being said, out of all the Celtics in the lineup, all of them, Peyton Pritchard, he's probably the one guy who teams want to hunt a little bit. And I thought that's what we saw tonight on the defensive end of the floor, especially the Milwaukee Bucks. There were a couple of moments where Peyton Pritchard, he was mismatched on Giannis, mismatched on Brook Lopez, mismatched on Chris Middleton. Bigger guys who are going to go after him. Now his matchup tonight was really Damian Lillard, and those guys are somewhat of the same size, so that's
Right.
where you really want Peyton Pritchard to be defending. But for all the praise that we do give Peyton Pritchard, I do believe it's notable to say that it is important for him to be competitive defensively. It's important for him to bring that tenacity, and it's important for the Celtics to shield him as much as possible defensively in these type of matchups. I thought they did an okay job of it tonight. Not the best of jobs. Now that's away from his 0 points and his 0 of 3 shooting. But Peyton Pritchard, if you really look at all of the size that's involved on the Celtics roster, all the versatility, Peyton Pritchard is the one guy who is a smaller player. He is. And you look at the entire Celtics lineup. Tatum, you're not going to hunt him. Brown, you're not going to hunt him. Derek White, surely not. Drew Holiday, no way. Kristaps Porzingis, no. Maybe quicker guards, sure, but still, the length with Kristaps Porzingis, still a lot of athleticism there. Not going to hunt him. Al Horford, he's
Sure.
definitely in the hunting conversation at this point in time just because of that athleticism that's dwindled a little bit in recent years, that quickness that's dwindled. But the size and the ability we saw tonight against Giannis, Al Horford was phenomenal against Giannis Antetokounmpo tonight. Peyton Pritchard, a lot of athleticism, a lot of speed, but the size. Guys can rise up over him. They can kind of bully him in a sense. And Peyton Pritchard, that's going to be the one guy who, defensively, we're going to have to see more in these matchups show up to the party. And I'm not saying Peyton Pritchard didn't show up to the party tonight because we can't necessarily bring out all the defensive stats in terms of the advanced metrics right now. But offensively, 0 points. Defensively, being hunted out there a little bit. We want to see in these matchups more often that sample size of Pritchard we saw last week, where he's putting up 20 points a game. He's competing on defense. Not saying again he wasn't competing on defense tonight, but he's a player that you really had trouble taking off the floor in the matchups in the prior week. Yet tonight, yes, he played 24 minutes, but there were times where you thought, Peyton Pritchard, he's kind of the weak link out here in a sense.
Mm.
So I do want to be fair in a sense to Peyton Pritchard, and maybe I'm being fair in a bad way right now. But for as much praise as we've given Pritchard, this is part of the reality of Peyton Pritchard that okay, he's a smaller player, and if he's not hitting shots, like he's kind of the weak link at a certain point in time. But again, we want to see the sample size we saw last week where he's putting up 20-point performance after 20-point performance, because if he's doing that, he's being your sixth man. He's competing on defense, and he's seemingly outplaying Drew Holiday in a sense, because he has for portions of the season so far. That's the Peyton Pritchard we can put out on the floor and feel confident
Yeah.
with. Yet tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks, maybe a lengthier team, beefier team, Peyton Pritchard, not always the best matchup at all times of the night. So Peyton Pritchard, a little bit of a rough moment tonight for Peyton Pritchard for certain. But that brings us to other guys on the roster who didn't really have rough moments tonight. And that would be Mr. Jaylen Brown. Because Jaylen Brown, we talked about Tatum earlier. We talked about Drew Holiday. Talked about Al Horford. Talked about Peyton Pritchard. Yeah, not the best of nights here. But we want to touch back on somebody who had a positive night. I don't want to say I skipped over him earlier because we did give Jason Tatum a lot of praise and we were giving these guys other guys praise. But Jaylen Brown, 25 points tonight, 3 assists, and of course 10 of 21 from the field, 3 of 9 from 3. Not the best of clips, but Jaylen Brown, mentioned him earlier in the broadcast where I thought he was part of the Tatum tandem. Well, he was the tandem with Tatum, that is, the duo with Tatum. He always is. But in terms of this game, when the 3-point shots weren't falling, thought Brown and Tatum, they were going towards the rim, being aggressive. Now, Jaylen Brown in this matchup, we know he takes matchups personally in the NBA, to say the least. You think about the Tyler Hero matchup on Monday night, was really aggressive going to the paint against the Heat specifically when he got that mismatch of Tyler Hero on him. Boom. I'm going straight to the paint. I'm going straight to the basket. I'm bullying this man. I'm scoring on him, or I'm going to make a play. He's been phenomenal in terms of his playmaking this week. Want to add that. But tonight, against Giannis, against the Bucks, Giannis, he had that moment earlier in the season where you got, nope, not doing it. They got the fake high five going, the fake handshake. And Jaylen Brown seemed motivated out there tonight. Now, probably I shouldn't say probably, but the stat line, Tatum and Brown, wasn't as impressive as Tatum's, but I thought certainly so. You saw Brown out on the floor, was as impressive in moments as Jason Tatum was tonight. So what do you think about Jaylen Brown's performance against the Milwaukee Bucks tonight, Franco?
Tonight's performance, it was why he's, in my opinion, the captain of this team. I know there is no C's on this roster on the jerseys, but I think that he's one of those people that is the true leader of this team. And in a game where the Milwaukee Bucks were bringing the energy, they wanted this win badly against the Celtics so they could have that one up on them. And this would have probably done monumentous things for their confidence going forward if they were able to come out of TD Garden with a win against the Boston Celtics. But Jaylen Brown wasn't having any of that. Being able to match up with Giannis and being able to look him dead in the eye, doing too small towards him, and being able to match it on the defensive end, being able to come away with a few great plays to almost stagnate any momentum the Bucks had going is really why he is the energy shifter. I think that if he continues to have these games and when the 3-point shot isn't falling, we always say to Tatum and Brown to go towards the rim. That's where you guys are the most proficient. And when Jaylen Brown's able to find those lanes to the rim, he's almost unstoppable. And it doesn't matter who's matched up on him. And it also will just open up a realm of opportunities for Tatum to have those open 3-pointers. Because when Tatum had the ball on the court tonight, you could almost see the whole Bucks defense tilt towards him. And that just leaves open lanes for Jaylen Brown to step in. And it almost feels disrespectful towards him. And I think that he did a fantastic job of bringing the energy and carrying the Celtics through the final fourth quarter.
Jaylen Brown, this is a performance you look at Brown and Tatum and go, look how far they've come. Look how far these two have come since 2021 and even before that. Of course, before that, they were dealing with other All-Stars on the roster, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Kemba Walker. But by 21-22, these two were the two superstars left on the Celtics roster. And a lot of people question, can Brown and Tatum, can they coexist together on one roster as two superstars on the Celtics roster? And can they lead the Celtics to contention? Well, of course, one of those questions has already been answered in terms of leading the Celtics to contention. They both have a ring. They've both been to almost three straight finals. Miami Heat couldn't come back from the 0-3 deficit, but 2022 finals, 2023, you miss it by one game. And last year, of course, they break through and win the finals. They've answered the question of can they bring the Celtics to contention, but they've also answered the question of these guys, can they coexist with each other as two superstars who are going to be unselfish within their role and play efficiently off each other. Tonight's game is one of those games you look at and go, this is the perfect performance from Tatum and Brown. And honestly, it goes towards that whole argument and conversation as a positive point for themselves because Jaylen Brown, 25 points, I thought he could have been the premier player of tonight's game. Yet Jason Tatum, you look at his stat line, he has 34 points tonight. He's super efficient from the floor, and we shouldn't take away from Jaylen Brown's efficiency. He was 10 of 21. That's not too bad in itself either. And two of these guys, they played off each other tonight. And you said it, Franco, where Jason Tatum, when he's drawing the entire defense towards himself, Jaylen Brown, it only opens up all of the opportunities on the floor for him, and he knows when to pick and choose his spots. Tatum, too, because Tatum, most of the offense runs through Jason Tatum. It just does. And it's why some of these other guards this year, we've seen Derek White and Drew Holiday. Now, Derek White, he had 7 assists tonight. Drew Holiday, quite a few assists as well. I believe 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. Drew Holiday and Derek White, maybe some of their assist numbers have come down a little bit this season. Some of their playmaking has come down, but it's because Jason Tatum is running the offense on most of the nights. And Jason Tatum, he's taking the responsibility of being the Celtics' top playmaker in that sense. Yet Jason Tatum, even within that role, Jaylen Brown knows when to pick and choose his spots of when to be the guy. And Jason Tatum knows when to let off the gas pedal just a little bit and let Jaylen Brown do his thing. And I thought tonight was one of the best examples of that in their entire careers, really, because you look at their stat lines 34 points and 25 points. Either or could have had the reverse stat. You could have had Jaylen Brown at 34 points tonight. You could have Jason Tatum at 25 points tonight. It was just how those two players rock and roll with each other. And it does a lot when you face a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, who They have all these players who have chemistry now with each other. Giannis, Chris Middleton. We don't give them enough credit for having some of the best chemistry in the league now for the last couple of years, but those guys do. Now, of course, they have to stay healthy in the lineup with each other to actually continue that chemistry and put it on stage for everybody to see. But those two guys have great chemistry. Chris Middleton was back tonight, and they want to gain that chemistry with Damian Lillard. And so you're going up against a matchup like that when you're the Boston Celtics. This is the perfect chance to showcase that Brown and Tatum tandem that works so well and can work so well together. And that ultimately led them to a championship last season. So phenomenal night for both of those guys. I know we touched on Tatum earlier. Now we're touching more on Brown, but really giving them both credit for being able to play off each other just so well. And another guy who, of course, plays off Brown and Tatum as well, too, as well, however you want to say
Yeah.
it, Mr. Sam Hauser.
Mm.
Sam Hauser, the last two games. Thank you. Thank you, Sam Hauser. The shots are starting to fall for Mr. Sam Hauser. Of course, 16 points tonight for Sam. And of course, on Wednesday night against the Detroit Pistons at 20 points. But tonight, Sam Hauser was 6 of 10 from the floor and 4 of 8 from beyond the arc. Sam Hauser, rough start to the season. We had a video out on him yesterday. We talked about him on Postgame, of course, on Wednesday night against the Pistons because we had to. He was really our player. He was our player of the game on Wednesday,
Yeah.
20-point game against the Detroit Pistons. And tonight he comes out yet again, 16 points on the night. And we talked about Peyton Pritchard earlier. Not the best of nights for Peyton Pritchard, but some of these other guys really made up the difference. Drew Holiday, 20 points tonight, really hasn't been putting up the scoring numbers at all this season. Sam Hauser, 16 points. That's 36 points between Holiday and Hauser that we're really not used to seeing. And what are we now becoming more accustomed to seeing? Peyton Pritchard put up a 20-point performance off the bench. Well, we didn't see any of that tonight, yet all the other guys made up the difference in that margin. And one of them, of course, was Sam Hauser with his 16 points on the night. Franco, over the last two games, Sam Hauser, of course, he's finally seeing his shot fall. What are you seeing different with Sam Hauser over the last two games than we did the first really 20 games of the season? What is he doing different from to make these shots fall? Or what are the Celtics offense doing different for him to be involved and make those shots fall?
I feel like the Celtics are kind of adding a player per game back into the game plan. I feel like they're slowly taking each player one by one, pulling them to the side, what's working for you, what's not, and slowly creating that production from them. And Sam Hauser is one of those players. We've talked about how he's been able to contribute on the defensive end, and the shot from Sam Hauser when it's fallen and he's hitting his threes, and that's a very big helper for the Celtics, especially when they're trying to get through those tough second and third periods. And he has done such a good job of stepping up and being able to find those looks. And it's also it's complimentary from our playmakers that they've been able to find him the looks that he's comfortable in. This team has been gelling more and more every day, and the more that we get Sam Hauser his looks, the more they're going to fall. And obviously those nights are going to be there where the shot's not falling, but I think that Sam Hauser being able to hit his threes is going to grow this team a lot. And the fact that he's also been able to facilitate here and there, being able to know where to stand, being able to know when Tatum is going to be taking his foot off the gas and when Jaylen Brown is going to be accelerating. I think that is something that he is one of those median players that will only grow. And when it gets to the point where Pritchard, Hauser, Drew Holiday, the Derek Whites, I don't even want to name Kristaps and Al Horford, when they start to get their game flowing and all cylinders are rotating for the Celtics, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop them.
Now, you mentioned Kristaps and Al Horford, and I want to shift the conversation to another bench player, but really more a different portion of the rotation, real quick, because I think this is going to be important before we wrap up here. I want to get your take on this, Franco. Now, Kristaps Porzingis didn't play tonight. Al Horford, phenomenal performance defensively tonight. That is, maybe the shot, 2
Yeah.
of 7 from three and 3 of 8 overall. And Al Horford, yes, he was all right tonight. Played a lot of minutes. Nemanja Keita, he came in for Al Horford, relieved him for 11 minutes in this game. But I want to get your take on this because we talked about it on Postgame the other night with me, Justin, and Xavier. We think the Celtics' handling of the big man rotation is a little odd right now.
Mm,
When I say the Celtics, I really mean Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff. Little inconsistent in terms of who's
right.
playing, who's not, what situations we're using which guys in. And I know it changes from night to night depending on the matchup. That's really what's going to determine who plays and who doesn't. And Kristaps Porzingis missed the first 17 games of the season and didn't play tonight as well. But do you believe that the big man rotation is being mishandled right now, or is Joe Mazzulla? Are you fine with how he's just kind of in and out with Xavier Tillman, Horford sitting every other night? Kristaps Porzingis, of course, can't really say too much about him because of injury. Kada, it seems like we're playing him against more of the interior matchups. Yet tonight, there is a matchup against Brook Lopez. We throw him out there. Brook Lopez can be a perimeter oriented three. Do you believe that the big man rotation is being mishandled, or do you think Joe Mazzulla is essentially handling it matchup by matchup?
I think it's more of a matchup by matchup base, and obviously, I think there's more matchups that you can see Tillman working in, and I think that tonight would have been a good night to see Tillman use those minutes that Keita had. I think when you look at players like Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez Jr., obviously Brook Lopez doesn't have the same step, but when you look at like a Bobby Portis, that's a more athletic. In 10 years ago, he would have been considered a power forward in today's game. And I think that's something that the Celtics need to utilize a little bit more, being able to have that small ball rotation, especially when Al Horford's playing well tonight. I think that Xavier Tillman should be becoming that protege under Al Horford whenever Al Horford's coming out. I think those two should be the platoon. And then when you look at Keita and Cornette, I think they are more the platoon swap with Kristaps. And I think that if we start to see them utilized in bigger matchups, and I think Keita will get exposed outside on the perimeter far too often for him to be getting those looks against Brook Lopez, because there were a few times that the switch would happen, and now look, he has Damian Lillard in front of him, and he's just able to get that step back three with ease. And I think we'll start to see a little bit more of Tillman as time goes on. And I think it's just, as I said before, I think just being able to get all these players to find their confidence and one by one find their role within this new offense, even though the roster hasn't changed nearly at all from last year. Players are still developing on the Celtics team and are growing in new skills, or are losing a step, or are getting better or getting worse in some cases. And it's just something that is going to be adjusted manually by Joe Mazzulla. And I believe that there are plenty of opportunities to have these players find their roles that they're comfortable in, and it's up to Joe to find the time to do it.
Now, do you believe in as we go along in the season that we're going to see more consistency within the big man rotation than right now? Because right now it seems all over the place. It really does. The other night saw Cornette. We saw we saw Xavier Tillman. We mostly don't see Xavier Tillman on some occasions. On some nights we will see Kada. On other nights we won't see Kada. Al Horford will sit on certain occasions because of his age. Kristaps Porzingis still in and out of the lineup because of injury management. But do you believe that later in the season we're going to see more consistency out of the big man rotation than what we see right now?
Yeah, it's not going to be as much playing around and figuring out which is mixing with which. And obviously, it's very challenging for your 1 and 2 centers to have one who's dealing with injuries and has a injury prone past. And then it also doesn't help that you have Al Horford, who's on the north side of his career, and as your second option to come off the bench. So it's really up to one of these three guys to take that position themselves. And we haven't seen one really do it yet. I mean, we've seen some good performances out of Cornette. We've seen some good performances out of Keita, but there hasn't been multiple nights in a row where we have seen, okay, Keita has came in for the past 3 games and had 10 points and is nearly near a double-double. Once that happens, the job is theirs. But I think until that happens and someone really makes that further step into being that star player for not star player, but rotational player and reliable center, backup center, then we'll just continue to see this mixing and matching, because it's really just going to take who wants to show up a couple of nights in a row and finally understands what they need to do and how they're going to do it in the Celtics rotation.
Yeah, part of this for me is in basketball, you can have an embarrassment of riches, but at the same time, within that embarrassment of riches, you have to figure out how everything slots and fits with each other. Now, later in the season, I think we're going to definitively see Porzingis. He's your starter, no doubt.
Yes.
He's going to get the bulk of the minutes. Al Horford, he's coming off the bench. He's going to get quite a few minutes, especially in matchups like we saw tonight, more important, highly touted matchups like against the Milwaukee Bucks. We're going to see it against other teams in the Eastern Conference. We saw it really on Sunday against Cleveland last week. Those are going to be your top 2 guys. After that, Cornette, Tillman, Keita. Right now, I feel like it's kind of matchup based in terms of, okay, we're throwing Tillman out here. Okay, we're throwing Kate out here. Okay, we're throwing Cornette out here. And I'm actually surprised because Tillman, it seems like he's been used the least out of those guys, considering last year we traded for him and had a nice game in the NBA Finals. Game 3 really won that game for us in a sense. And we re signed him and we thought, hey, this is going to be somebody who's pretty important within the big man rotation, yet he's almost the 5th big guy right now. Yet the other 2, Keita and Cornette, they're being used more than him. I feel like those 3, that 3 trio, right? That trio, they're going to need to figure it out in terms of what is the hierarchy within those 3 players.
Roman a
Because
ring.
I understand in some light, they give you a ton of options to, oh, against the Detroit Pistons, we're gonna have Luke Cornett go out there. Against the Miami Heat, we're gonna have Luke Cornett go out there. Against the Cleveland Cavaliers, we're not gonna have Kata play out there. We're gonna have our top 2 big guys play more, and we're not gonna see any of these guys. And that's maybe more the reality later on in the playoffs if Horford, Porzingis, they don't get hurt. Please, neither of them get hurt. We're not going to see a ton of the next 3 in the big man rotation, but it seems like okay, there's some picking and choosing between who's playing in what particular matchups, and that's fine. But at the same time, there's some inconsistency within when these guys are playing, and you'll see moments in time where, oh yeah, Tillman, he got 15 minutes out there, he looked all right, and then we won't see him for an entire week. Same thing with Keita. Same thing with Cornette. Cornette
Right.
had a phenomenal week. Now, I don't think this was necessarily the matchup for Cornette, so it's a little understandable he didn't play at all tonight. But these guys, they'll just be a little. I should say the Celtics coaching staff a little inconsistent of when they're putting these guys in and how long they're rolling with these guys on a game to game basis. I understand it's matchup oriented, and I understand that yes, you're going to throw some of the different combinations out there against different matchups, but really the inconsistency is what rubs me the wrong way a little bit right now with the specifically Tillman, Cornette, and Cada. Now, you could say too, this is a little bit of a tryout period for the Celtics in terms of who's really going to take that slot because you even talked about it, Franco, who is going to establish themselves as that consistent rotation player, the player we know. Okay, Porzingis, he's sitting out tonight, or Horford, he's sitting out tonight, or Horford, we're playing him less minutes against this matchup tonight. Who's going to be that next guy who slots into the rotation? Because right now I thought, well, I should say, before the season began, we thought Tillman is going to be that guy. We thought Xavier Tillman
Yeah.
was easily going to be that guy, no doubt. Since Cada's early season performance, since Cornette's back and forth performances throughout the season, again, we talked about too, these guys, Cornette and Cada, they're almost playing up more than Tillman. It's a little, we're not really sure at this point in time. I believe it'll shape itself out, or we'll see more of the consistency later on in time as the season goes along. And the Celtics, again, in the playoffs, the Celtics will consolidate their rotation to a point where we probably won't be seeing a ton of these guys unless somebody gets hurt. Again, please, nobody get hurt. But that is going to be the reality later on in the season. There's going to be some consolidation in the rotation. There's going to be more decisiveness in who plays which matchups and who is the next big guy coming in. But I thought tonight was definitely one of those examples where, yep, we kind of just see a different big man rotation from what we saw against the Detroit Pistons on Wednesday. We're seeing a different big man rotation than what we saw in Cleveland and against Miami earlier this week. And we're just not seeing a ton of consistency within that spot of the roster, that portion of the roster. And again, the Celtics have an embarrassment of riches within all those big guys, but they got to figure out what is the consistent rotation within all those players, specifically after Porzingis and Horford, looking at Cornette, Cada, and of course Xavier Tillman. But that brings me to I want to talk about before we wrap up here because we're getting close to the end. But I want to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks for a second because we faced them tonight. Didn't talk a whole bunch about them. We talked about Giannis, Dame, Chris Middleton a little bit, but I do want to touch on Chris Middleton here because tonight he came out and there were portions of this game where, yeah, it kind of took it to the Celtics a little bit, made it to the free throw line 6 times, made some crucial I shouldn't say crucial because they lost, but
Yep.
made crucial free throws a little bit down the stretch. Crucial. They lost again. Made the game a little closer down the stretch for the Milwaukee Bucks. 6 of 6 from the free throw line, but he was 2 of 10. 2 of 10 from the field, 1 of 3 from three, and Chris Middleton finished with 11 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. And Chris Middleton, not the best of nights at all. However, this was his first game back since May,
Right.
and of course,
Double ankle surgery. That doesn't sound fun at all.
I
to
mean,
come
I
back
don't even
from.
know how that would
My
feel. I
career
mean,
will be
you're
over.
thinking about his recovery and rehab for that. He probably didn't play basketball for 2 or 3 months in the
That-
summer, which the summer is really when that conditioning period, guys, that's when they're made during the summer. Now, I know Chris Middleton's a veteran, he's been through that, but in terms of keeping your body in shape, getting in shape for the next season at hand, the summer is crucial. Whether you're a young player developing or a veteran player, just keeping your body intact for the next season, keeping your body conditioned, that summer portion is crucial. Chris Middleton probably wasn't playing a whole bunch of basketball over
No.
the summer. He was rehabbing a lot to get back onto the basketball court. Tonight didn't look like the best of Chris Middleton's we've seen. So I want to give him a little bit of leeway in terms of the last week. We talked about Kristaps Porzingis. We were going, okay, he's active. Kristaps Porzingis, he actually came back and looked like Kristaps Porzingis. We want to say
Yeah.
that. Didn't really miss a beat. But we still give him the benefit of the doubt in a sense where we go, Kristaps Porzingis, he missed all this time. If he looks a little shaky in some spots, we expect that. So we kind of expect that out of Chris Middleton as well, and even more so because of the injury he had and the time he missed. But what level to this Bucks team does Chris Middleton bring? Because you look at where they're at now. They're 11-11. Terrible start to the season. Ever since then, a little bit better. They haven't been at the start of the season. Every Celtics fan out there was laughing, going, "Oh, Look who the 14th and 15th seeds are. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers. That's how this season started. It was the Bucks and the Sixers, 14 and 15, right down there about what, 8, 9 games into the
Right.
season. They were slotted, boom, last in the conference. Yet, the Milwaukee Bucks, they've made their way back up into the play-in portion, even above that play-in spot now. But they're 11-11. They've been playing better as of recently. Where does Chris Middleton actually bring this Milwaukee Bucks team? Because I think we're in agreement that they've fallen out of contention in a sense, in terms of probably not a top 5 NBA team anymore, even with Giannis on the roster. But where exactly in the East and within the sphere of the conversation of contention does Chris Middleton bring the Bucks? Does he bring them? Can they be top 3 in the East this year? Top 4, top 5? Where exactly does Chris Middleton bring the Bucks?
I think that the Bucks fall into the category of the Knicks and Heat. I think where he's starting to see the old competitors, the old contenders, the people who we almost knew we were going to see in the first, second, and third rounds of the playoffs before the playoffs even began, start to dwindle and lose that kindling that they used to have. But Chris Middleton coming back into the lineup for the Bucks is only going to keep the trend upward for the Bucks, especially during the regular season. He's a very key player to the Milwaukee Bucks. He's one of the longest tenured players, and he is someone that when he gets his time back, it will make key contributions. But I believe I saw during pregame that Doc Rivers introduced Chris Middleton to the team like he's never even met the team before when he first came back onto the practice court. So that's the difference between the return of Kristaps and the return of Chris Middleton. Kristaps was in the building every single day with those guys. And from the looks of it, it seems like Chris Middleton wasn't around to be seen. He was more in rehab facilities getting his ankles taken care of before he could even come back to practice. And I think that we are going to see a mix of the new teams, Pacers, Cavaliers, Magic, and they're going to mix in with the Miami Heats, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and obviously the New York Knicks are not really in the same conversation because I think they're one of those teams that are a little bit newer of a look because we really haven't seen much of them other than on opening night. And I think that the Knicks are still, in my opinion, the one of the better competing teams in the East for us. But I think that obviously the Eastern Conference runs through Boston, and we'll see where the bricks lie. And I think that the Bucks, if we see them in a series, they'll give us a little bit of trouble because this will be the first time that we match up against the Milwaukee Bucks with Damian Lillard in a playoff situation.
The Milwaukee Bucks, we look at the Celtics and Bucks and where they've gone in recent seasons. The Milwaukee Bucks were champions in 2021. The Celtics were 500. Now the Celtics are champions and the Milwaukee Bucks are 500. The directions in which these two franchises have gone in recent years is very, very stark to see because Milwaukee, when they had Drew Holiday, before the Drew Holiday trade, in which they, yikes, indirectly moved Drew Holiday to Portland and then to the Celtics for Damian Lillard, who, again, 31 points tonight Damian Lillard had. When the Milwaukee Bucks did that, they pretty much sunk their franchise. And of course, the subsequent firing of Mike Budenholzer, then the replacement of him for Adrian Griffin, who they then fired 40 games into the season last year, and then replaced him with Doc Rivers. that pretty much sunk the whole ship for them. Now, there's still a chance for the Milwaukee Bucks to win the East, of course, this year because they're going to have these three guys likely healthy. Lillard, Giannis, Middleton, likely. I want to say likely because you never know what can happen, but projected, they're supposed to have these guys healthy later on in the season, unlike they did last season. All three of those guys were banged up with injuries to end last year's season. Maybe the Pacers series goes different. They beat the Pacers. We, of course, faced the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe we faced the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals instead last year. And who knows where that series actually goes? Because every game against the Pacers was a little dicey for the Celtics. It was a sweep, but it was one of the more competitive sweeps we've seen in a while. Yet the Milwaukee Bucks, right now, we're sitting here kind of, we kind of denounced them a little bit. I think with the 11-11 record and what happened last season and the fall we've seen within them, we're denouncing them because defensively they're not the same team as they once were. Offensively, they're missing pieces they once had. Specifically upon the perimeter, we used to think in 2019, oh my goodness, this is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the entire league. We can't stop them from the perimeter yet. Now it doesn't really feel that way whatsoever. And the Milwaukee Bucks, this is where the Celtics were just, we should be grateful as Celtics fans because the Milwaukee Bucks, they just, I, I, I mentioned it earlier on the broadcast. If they can't win a game like tonight, I don't know how they're going to beat us 4 out of 7 times in a
Right.
series. Now, Giannis does muck things up just a little bit in terms of,
Villain.
okay, he's gonna be if we play a series with the Milwaukee Bucks, he's gonna be the best player on the floor. But
Yeah.
really around him, you have other guys who they just simply do not trust. Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, they trust those guys. Brooke Lopez, they trust those guys. After that, they don't trust anybody. They do
Yep.
not trust a fifth starter. They don't trust anybody off their bench, none whatsoever. And that's the
Trent was
story with the Milwaukee
non-existent.
Bucks. They've completely sacrificed their depth in order to pay the guys at the top of the roster they have right now. And the top of the guys the guys at the top of the roster of the Milwaukee Bucks, I don't want to say they don't really get the job done entirely, but they're not exactly the best top four in the entire NBA. They're an aging top four in the NBA. We know Brooke Lopez, he's a 10-year plus vet. Giannis, he was drafted over 10 years ago. Lillard and Chris Middleton, both guys who came into the league early 2010. So this is an aging group at the top of the roster for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the rest of the roster they don't really trust whatsoever. And we posted a video on it this morning where we were talking about it last post game because we were talking about the next matchup. We were talking about this matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks, and we were saying the Celtics, for as good as they are right now, the Milwaukee Bucks represent something, or rather, transactions. They'll represent transactions within a contending team. The Celtics, they don't want to misstep in. They don't want to accidentally go and trade for an over 30 point guard who they're going to go and pay $40 million for. Or they don't want to go sign a bunch of role players who are going to do nothing for them. They don't want to get rid of players who are actually producing, like Drew Holiday was for the Bucks, for somebody who is going to be either the same level and is going to be the same level, but cause you to not be able to fill out the depth. We've seen that within multiple rosters. We saw it with the Lakers. We were seeing it with the Nuggets. We saw it with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I'll even mention this team too, the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix Suns, they go and trade for Bradley Beal. Kevin Durant's there. Devin Booker.
That
All
was
those
just
guys making 40 plus million. Kevin Durant making upwards of 50 million. You can't fill out the rest of the roster. And that's where the Milwaukee Bucks are right now. That's not where the Celtics are yet. But the Celtics are definitely going to have to be careful in order to not become this team later on down the line and keep this. I don't want to say this dynastic run going. Only won one championship, folks, but if we win another, we're going to have to start talking about dynasties. But that's really what the Celtics are chasing right now is a dynasty. But a player, I'm going to shift the conversation here right now. A player who really started this run for the Celtics, Marcus Smart. We're going to be seeing him tomorrow against the Memphis Grizzlies. Game starts at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to shift the conversation on to future endeavors for the Boston Celtics because tomorrow the Celtics have yet another game, and it's against Marcus Smart and the Memphis Grizzlies. Of course, last year, Marcus Smart did not play in the two games the Grizzlies faced the Celtics in, both in Memphis and then up in Boston. Marcus Smart was hurt for both of those games, yet tomorrow, Marcus Smart remains off the injury report, and it looks like we have a clear runway for Marcus Smart to play his first ever NBA game against the Boston Celtics tomorrow. It's going to be emotional, Franco.
Oh,
I know we've seen him in a Grizzlies uniform. I know we saw him on the sideline with the Grizzlies, but him playing against the Boston Celtics will be a completely different atmosphere and scenario. Franco, what is your outlook for tomorrow's game between the Celtics and Grizzlies, and of course, our reunion with Marcus Smart?
I think that it was good to get the flowers out of the way for the first game last season when he made his return back to Boston when he wasn't suited up. I think that was beneficial for him, and it kind of takes the heart out of the situation.
Now, do you think he's going to get another video tomorrow? He got a video last year. Had it up on
No,
the Celtics Talk Weekly Instagram
no,
page. Posted it all over the place. Do you think he's going to get another video tomorrow?
no. I bet you when he comes into the building, he does his pregame routine when he does his little shot, baseline shot that's backwards 3-point shot. He makes that. He'll get his standing ovation. But once tip off is there, it's all business. And the Memphis Grizzlies are looking like a team. They're one of my dark horse teams in the Western Conference this year because you look at
Fourth seed right now.
Yeah, you look at the roster that they put around, and before John Morant dealt with his off the court and his injury issues last year, he was quoted saying that the only team that the Grizzlies would be running into is the Celtics, and they've done a good job of proving that. And the development of their players that they've had, bringing in Wells and Edie. I'm not sure what their availability is for tomorrow. I believe Edie's dealing with some injury issues, but they have a very, very filled depth chart when you look at their roster. And that's something that the Celtics are going to have to match up with. But I don't think this is a team that should give the Celtics too much of a challenge. And obviously, Marcus is going to want to get that little get back on Boston a little bit. But I think this will be an entertaining game for any Marcus Smart fan because it'll be interesting to see how Drew Holiday and Marcus Smart match up against each other because that was the first thing that was the replacement for him. And I think that we'll also see Smart lined up against Brown and Tatum, which will be very entertaining for us Celtics fans to watch. But other than just from the cinematic value of the game, I think that we'll be getting a good competition. And this is one of those games where one of those three big men at the bottom of that rotation, this is one of those opportunities that one of them should and could be able to step up big.
Yeah, and I think when you say Marcus Smart fan, Franco, basically it's the same thing as
Everyone.
a Celtic fan.
Yes.
Same thing, same difference. If you're a Celtic fan, I don't know how you're not a Marcus Smart fan. You can say whatever you want about Marcus Smart. Some people, of course, had a grift with how he played in Boston at times, but in the end, I think everybody really appreciated what Marcus Smart brought to the Celtics in his 9 years with the team. Little gut wrenching that he played 9 years, didn't get a 10th year, that full decade, and then of course in the 10th year we finally win the championship. But Marcus Smart was certainly part of those building blocks up towards a championship roster and towards championship competitiveness and contention for the Celtics. So even though he's not on the roster anymore, Marcus Smart had a lot to do with how good the Celtics are today. And of course, seeing him on that Garden Parquet tomorrow. Ooh, it's giving me chills right now, Franco. It's gonna be a little emotional. I know we saw him on the sideline last year, and we saw the
I like my
Grizzlies
green leg on.
and visit, but him playing against the Celtics, I would not be surprised if the Celtics, I'm not going to say they're going to lose this game or anything, but it's going to be one of their toughest games of the year. I think that's safe to say. Marcus Smart is going to be out there playing no matter what kind of season he's had up to this point. Marcus Smart is going to compete. He's going to be fiery. He's going to be diving on the floor for a ball. And this is going to be one of those rare occasions where an opponent dives on the floor for a ball or makes a great play, and the home crowd is going to cheer. That's just what's going to happen. And of course, we'll have everybody's coverage for that game tomorrow at, I shouldn't say at 7 o'clock. That's when the game starts. 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern is when the Celtics and Grizzlies face off tomorrow at the Garden. Marcus Smart's playing return to the Garden. Faced the Celtics last year twice, but he was on the sideline, hurt both times. Yet this year, he's finally coming back and playing against the Celtics for the first time since being traded away to the Memphis Grizzlies in a 3-team deal for Kristaps Porzingis. We expect Kristaps to also be in the lineup tomorrow. Should be an interesting matchup. Marcus Smart going up against all the guys who the Celtics essentially traded him for, and his former team, former duo, who he did a lot for in terms of Brown and Tatum, developing them, bringing them along the way. But tomorrow, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, Celtics versus Grizzlies at the Garden. We'll have your coverage here after the game on CTW Postgame. That's it tonight, Franco. That's it from us. The Celtics, of course, come out with a nice victory against the Milwaukee Bucks on a Friday night and one of the more entertaining games of the season, winning 111-105. Tomorrow, Celtics strap them up yet again. They'll be facing the Grizzlies at the Garden, and of course, we will have your coverage here after the game. So, from me, your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and Nick Franco, thank you all for watching the Celtics Talk Weekly Postgame Show. We will see you all tomorrow. And like I always say, go Celtics.